communicate. I mean, if you're 5 minutes late, call them, text them, let them know. If you're 10 minutes late, let them know. Let them know when you're submitting the file. I mean, these are all really simple things.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out on the podcast treadmill. Once again, got a guest in front of me. Can't wait to talk to him. First, want to introduce you to the two sponsors today. Of course, Alamode is the software that I have been using for almost 30 years. You should be as well. Alamode.com is where you go. And OREP Insurance. OREP, of course, is the insurance, the E&O that I choose to work with because they are a broker. That means they can get the best prices and the best deal for me. OREP.org. That's OREP.org. Well, I want to introduce you to my new friend, Mr. Tanner Haas. Tanner is dual licensed as an appraiser and a broker. He's been appraising since he was 17 years old, believe it or not. He is located in Southern California, actually in an area where I used to live. They call it the desert area. He has appraised anything from shacks in Joshua Tree to fancy Hollywood homes in Malibu. Welcome to the program, Mr. Tanner. Appreciate you being here.
Hey, Dustin. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I really appreciate you reaching out. We should probably just start with a story that you told me before coming on, because it was this story that prompted you to reach out to me, and I think it kind of sets the tone for what we're going to talk about today. So take it away, my friend. Tell me the story that prompted you to get on the email and say, "Gosh darn it, Dustin, I need to come on your program."
Yeah, so I was really writing to you in a place of frustration. As you mentioned, I'm a dual licensed broker and appraiser, so I was representing a buyer for a relatively complex property in the Joshua Tree area. It was architectural, it was on acreage, it was updated, and I wanted to meet the appraiser there. I find that I can bring some value to him. I had a list of upgrades, I had some recent sales, and I had the inside track on some pendings, and I knew the contract price. So, we set up a time. I gave him the lockbox combo just in case he got there a few minutes early.
Okay.
And I get there right on time, turn the lights on, open up, I'm waiting. 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, and I reach out and, to my surprise, he said, "Oh, well, I had some time earlier in the day." So I went and handled it and I'm done.
Okay.
And
wait. You got to slow down a little bit, because number one, if anybody's been to Joshua Tree, that is not an easy trek, especially you're in Riverside, right?
No, I'm in the Coachella Valley, so next to Palm Springs in Cathedral
That's right.
City.
Okay, you were raised in Riverside. Okay, so but you've still got a ways to go, right? You've still got a ways to drive.
Yeah.
You get up there, you get everything ready. There's no communication from this appraiser that, hey, I is it okay if I go early? Hey, I went early. Nothing. You're sitting there waiting for the time and no communication at all.
Yep, that is 100% correct. And I reach out, and he almost gets angry at me for reaching out to him and saying I'm bugging him. So this whole experience just really frustrated me, and it just prompted me to send you that email.
Well, now, and let's pause for a second just to set this up, because I assume this is more of a straw that broke the camel's back type of a thing. In other words, this is probably not the first time that you've had some challenges and difficulties with appraisers.
That's 100% correct. I find that a lot of the appraisers that I deal with are, and I hate to say it, but lazy, uncommunicative. They don't really, they find that realtors are a burden, and they don't even want to deal with them at all. And, lo and behold, and I hate to say it, but a lot of these real estate agents, they know markets far more than we do. They know things on such a micro level. They know laws that are changing. They know pendings that are coming up, and they're good relationships to have. And if you have a plethora of good relationships with agents, you're a much better appraiser because you can tap into those clients, you can tap into those people and gather more information and make yourself a better appraiser and have more thorough, thought out appraisals.
I'm gonna have you play therapist for just a second here.
Yeah.
I'm imagining that some of my listeners are saying, yeah, that actually rings true. But why? Why is it that appraisers in general, I don't think all of them, of course, not my listeners, we're talking about other individuals, but
Yeah.
why is it that some appraisers have that attitude of, it's a little self-centered, right? It's more about them than it is about the community.
Yeah, I think appraisers in general are kind of a lone wolf, and they're hard to get a hold of, is what I hear. And after you've done so much, you think you know everything, but things are always changing. So to kind of separate yourself and not communicate with people it's biting yourself in the butt, and you're going to end up getting yourself in trouble.
This is kind of a chicken and egg question, because I'm not sure which one comes first, but I've noticed the same thing, right? And the question, it begs the question, does this profession draw in the more introverted, more appraiser cave dwelling individual, or does being in this profession cause us to be so?
I think being in this profession probably causes us to be so, because we do deal with some really bad agents and things get somewhat annoying at times. And you lump it all together and you're like, okay, well, all agents are annoying, but it's not the truth. So you just kind of have to parse out individuals on a case by case basis and, do the best you can. So.
Well, I love that answer. I think that's interesting because, again, I want to be empathetic to my listeners for just a second, get that in their shoes, because I assume there's a few listeners out there, as you told that story, are probably saying, well, yeah, of course, Tanner, I wouldn't want to meet you either, because you already mentioned that, hey, you might have some pendings, you might have some comps, you might want to get in here and kind of wrangle everything, and I just want to avoid that conversation altogether. As a licensed broker and a licensed appraiser, talk to me about that attitude, because I'll be honest with you, I've had that. I admit it. There's times when I'm like, okay, here we go. He's got a big stack of papers. Let's go to town, right? Help change my attitude, because I've been guilty of that.
Okay, so I try to keep them in the lane that they know more than I do, first of all. And I don't say I have a list of comps, because the appraiser is the one who decides what's a comp and what's not a comp. So I just say I have a list of recent sales. You may have them, you may not. I've been talking to some agents. I know the contract prices for a few pendings, so I have some notes for you. And I have a list of upgrades. It's just a really informational package. I'm not trying to direct you in any way. I just want to be helpful if I can. You can take it. You don't have to take it. It's up to you. But I'm just here to give you some value.
I love that. And we've talked a little bit on this about that on this program, but we do have realtor listeners, non-appraiser realtor listeners to this program. I've had them reach out to me, so I know they're out there. So let's talk to them for just a second. You just mentioned, I'm careful to not say I have comps for you. Why is that such a big deal?
Because I feel like appraisers, as we've been talking about, they feel like they know better than most agents.
Right.
So I think saying I have a list of comps might rub them the wrong way. So saying I have a list of recent sales in the area, or I have a list of recent sales in the area that I used when, listing this property or submitting an offer. I think that's a lot more, what is it? Less, I don't know the word for it. I'm sorry.
Well, let's just call it what it is. I mean, it's more charitable toward the person that you're talking to, right? You're giving them the credibility that you feel that they deserve. Right. You're an expert, you're a professional. So let's go from that standpoint.
Yep. Yeah. I'm not saying here's some comps, you should use these comps because they're the best comps. I'm saying here's some sales. Maybe you can take a look at them. I think they're pretty good,
Yeah. Right. And be respectful of the fact that ultimately it is up to the appraiser to decide what that looks like. We're talking with Tanner Haas. He's out of Southern California, and unique perspective from Tanner, because he, of course, is an appraiser and a realtor, specifically a broker. Tanner, when we get back, I want to talk about maybe some advice that you can give appraisers. Most of our listeners are appraisers, and let's talk about from the perspective of a real estate agent who is an appraiser, what appraisers can do to improve the value that they bring to the profession. First, want to pause and remind you that we are sponsored by some great companies. Speaking of some great value to the profession, how about OREP Insurance? Now, I know, folks, you don't want to think about E&O. Who wants to? Well, guess what, folks? I recently had a great opportunity to reach out to my E&O provider, who happens to be OREP, and had a great conversation with them about something that I was dealing with. And I was very grateful for their knowledge and their understanding and their professionalism as I dealt with them. You will be as well if you're with any other company. Check them out. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. Speaking of professional, a la mode. A la mode, of course, is the software that brings tons of value to appraisers. There's a reason that they lead the nation in the report writing software for residential appraisals, because of the great things that they bring. I was on an inspection yesterday, and I had an opportunity to go through the checklist that I have, created on my mobile app, which allows me to basically go through the house from the outside in the order that I prefer. In other words, it's customized to me. That's one of the great benefits that a la mode brings to the table. Check them out, going to alamode.com or 800 a la mode. And welcome back to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out on the walking desk today, trying to get my 48-year-old body in shape is what I'm doing as we talk with Tanner Haas out of Southern California, my old stomping grounds. I lived in Indio for a little bit. We talked a little bit off the air, and you're not too far from there. Tanner, welcome to the program, and thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate your perspective today.
Absolutely.
We've been talking a little bit about some frustrations that I think that both realtors and, let's face it, appraisers deal with, right? We sometimes have this hostile, I'm going to call it, environment when appraisers are working with realtors, and unfortunately, right? I've got some great realtor friends that I love hanging out with. One of the individual that I trained recently, my most recent trainee, is also a realtor, so I get a little different perspective from him as well as he's gone through that training. What advice, Tanner, would you give to appraisers who want to, who listen to this program and say, you know what, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that shows up early, does my thing, says nothing to anybody, and then gets annoyed that the appraiser, or the realtor rather, reached out to me and said, hey, where the hell are you? I've been waiting for 30 minutes. What advice would you give to appraisers along those lines?
It's really basic stuff, but communicate. I mean, if you're 5 minutes late, call them, text them, let them know. If you're 10 minutes late, let them know. Let them know when you're submitting the file. I mean, these are all really simple things. Another thing I like to do, and it does take some time, but I'll host lunch and learns at specific brokerages. We'll do question and answer, and you'd be amazed at the number of questions and the number of agents that actually show up to ask questions with notepads that they've been saving for months and months.
They want to know.
They want to know, and it's really difficult to get a hold of appraisers, is what I find, and that's what all these agents say. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like you're the only appraiser I've ever seen in person," or it's an interesting.
They're actually real boys and girls.
Yeah, exactly, and so that's something I really like to do. I've done it several times, and when I go into these lunch and learns, I'll tell them exactly how I pick comps. I'll tell them, the parameters that I start with, and I'll give them a specific area, and I'll say, hey, okay, so I'll start here with these parameters. If I can't find anything, this is how I'll expand. And then I'll go through my whole methodology. I'll tell them how I value unpermitted structures or in-ground pools or bedroom and bathroom, so on and so forth, lot size. And I find that by doing this, it makes all the agents in that office a little more competent, and it kind of snowballs, and everybody in your market is getting a little better at what they do, and prices properties are getting priced well, and there's a little less, you're having to cut values a little more less because people are actually know what they're doing. So, it creates a better market overall if appraisers communicate more.
And what I'm also hearing that is in the communication, education, right? Educate the individual, not in a condescending way, not in a I know more than you, but help the other party understand what you know, and then listen to the other party and find out what they know. I think we appraisers sometimes, as you mentioned, we sometimes think we know more than the real estate agent. And I kind of think maybe sometimes the opposite is true.
Yep, I think it's a case by case basis and an agent by agent basis. I mean, there's a ton of agents that I definitely know more than, and there's a ton of agents that definitely know more than me. And if we all lean on each other, I think we can create a better relationship and close more transactions and get things done competently.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've developed relationships, as I mentioned earlier, with real estate agents over the years. And some of them, I'm going on 20 plus years that I've had relationships with them, in the sense that I have lunch with them, in the sense that I reach out to them and say, hey, Paul, I got a weird one. Let's talk through this together. And Paul is willing to do that. And since I can reach out and I can create statistical support for adjustments based on some interviews that I've done over the phone, with certain agents and getting some data together that way. Let's talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, just maybe shifting gear, not totally, but maybe just changing lanes just a titch here, because I think the conversation that we're having today very much has to do with or applies to some of the changes that are happening in the appraisal world right now, right? We've got some modernization taking place. We've got the introduction from Fannie Mae of some different products, some different forms. There's a lot of turmoil, if you will, with some appraisers right now with some changes. What advice would you give from the realm of being both a broker, a real estate broker, and a licensed appraiser to appraisers as we move forward in this modernization era?
I think we really need to sharpen our skills, and we really need to prove that we are necessary. If we stay on this really lackadaisical track and just do things as we're doing, they will find ways to diminish our role, to keep us under wrap, keep us in check, and to use us less and less if we don't come from a place of helping and being solid partners in the entire transaction. If we become a roadblock, then they're going to try to figure out ways to diminish what we do faster and faster.
But being lackadaisical is so easy, Tanner.
Yeah, it's easy, and then you should probably get a new job.
Amen. No, I think this is great advice. We have to constantly be thinking about, how do I bring a unique value proposition to my clients? How do I bring that value to the industry so that the word you mentioned, remain relevant, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of remaining relevant, last question for you today. I know there's appraisers out there who are considering becoming agents as well. And again, we've got agents that listen, and I think, sometimes consider what it would be like to be an appraiser. Talk to us about that dual hat, and what recommendations, suggestions would you give rather to one who is considering getting the second?
Yeah, so keep the hats separate as possible. I'll give you an example. If I have a buyer and we put an offer in on a house, and we don't get our offer accepted, and then I get an appraisal order for that same property, I'll tell the AMC that I had a buyer submit an offer and I don't feel comfortable doing this one. So it's really important to keep those hats as separate as possible. That's really my biggest word of advice is don't intermingle them, because that's when things get sticky.
Well, from a financial perspective, and by the way, that's great advice. From a financial perspective, is this something you would encourage? It's something you would discourage? In other words, I can see someone, in fact, I've gone through this myself, right? Would I bring the most value to my profession, to myself, to my family, to my income, to really focus on appraisal? Or is it nice to kind of have the two to bounce off of?
Yeah, so I definitely find that being both improves both sides of it. Being a broker and an appraiser, I learned the transaction side of it more on the broker side, and then I learned the valuing on the other side, and it wraps up to be a really solid way to look at things, and a really well-rounded way to look at things. And where if you're just an appraiser, you're not really seeing the transaction side of things, you're not really understanding how certain things work. So it helps me immensely. I think financially and time-wise, it gets really, really hectic at times. But you just have to really make sure you have great time management skills. And I think it's important to figure out which one you want to do more, because you can't do both of them equally, in my opinion. I do far more appraisals than I do on the broker side. And if I wanted to do more broker side, then I would have to scale back on the appraisal. So you just have to really find out what's important to you.
Very good advice, very good perspective, Mr. Tanner Haas. I really appreciate you reaching out. A big shout out and encouragement to other appraisers who have had similar, not necessarily discouraging experiences, but any experience, any thought that hey, I would love to share that with other appraisers. We got thousands of appraisers that listen to this program. A big shout out and an invite to any of those appraisers who would like to come on the program. It wasn't that hard, right?
No, it's terrifying. No, I'm just kidding. It was fine.
You did wonderful. Thank you, Tanner, for being on from Southern California. I appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Speaking of Southern California, of course, we have one of our great mastermind groups that meets every quarter, is now hosted and housed in right next to LAX in Southern California. And by the way, folks, when you hear that, don't think that you have to be in Southern California to belong. Most of the people in that group fly in, and that's why we do it at LAX. It's an easy flight for most people, and it's an amazing experience. Invite all of you to take a look at the mastermind. Would love to have you out. Again, thank you again, Tanner, for being on. Thank you, folks, and go create some value.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.